Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, as we mentioned last night, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He gives us guidance on all things. In our aqeedah, what do we believe in? He gives us guidance. And for how we should live our lives, He gives us guidance. How do we properly worship Him? How many times a day do we pray? How do you do wudu properly? And then also on transactions, what we call mu'amalat. How do we make sure we're fulfilling the rights of others? How do we make sure that the way we are buying and selling something is halal? He gives us guidance on all of these things. That is why it is essential for every single one of us individually and for any entity, whether it's a masjid or a company or whatever it may be, that you're always operating under the guidance of someone knowledgeable. You're always operating under the guidance of someone who you can ask, is this halal, is this permissible, or is this not permissible? We are doing this project. Is there anything wrong with it Islamically? And if there is, then he gives you guidance on how to fix it. In the Muslim countries, in the Arab world, in Southeast Asia, you have Sharia advisors. Advisors who sometimes are paid, sometimes who are not paid, who banks and companies and factories and whatever it may be, they hire them or they consult with them and they ask them, is this a halal product that we are about to launch? And this is our product, this is our whatever, is it permissible for us or not? Similarly with the masajid, they have their imam and they ask their imam, is this permissible for us or not? Even the smallest things, sometimes you need guidance from someone who is more knowledgeable. So the point is that in all of our a'mal, in all of our transactions, in all of our actions, in all of our day-to-day activities, we are in need of someone who can guide us Islamically. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us these rules and given us these regulations and these rulings that we are to follow. And someone who has knowledge of these can easily guide us. And when buying and selling something, one of the most prohibited elements, one of the things that we need to watch out for the most is riba, usury, interest. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, يَمْحَقَ اللَّهُ الرِّبَا وَيُرْبِ الصَّدَقَاتِ. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decreases in riba and He increases in sadaqat. Riba, you're giving $10 and you're taking back $11. You're giving 2 dates and you're taking back 3 dates. It seems that I'm making money here. It seems that I'm getting a profit here. And on the other hand, you look at charity. When you leave the masjid, you put $20 in the box. You know someone is in need, and so you say, here, let me help you pay your bills, pay your rent, feed your family, whatever it is. And so it seems I just lost $20. I just lost $100. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, يَمْحَقَ اللَّهُ الرِّبَا. Riba, where you think you might be making money, Allah causes decrease in it. وَيُرْبِ الصَّدَقَاتِ. And sadaqat, the donations you give, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala causes increase in it. This increase and decrease, if we look at it from an ukhrawi point of view, from the point of view of the hereafter, it makes absolute sense. This thing is haram, so yeah, I might be making some money in this world, but in the hereafter, this is going to come back and haunt me. I might be punished for this. I might be questioned about this. And for sadaqat, yes, I'm losing some money in this world, but in the hereafter, my reward will increase so much, therefore it's an increase. But even from a dunyavi point of view, from the point of view of the dunya, someone who makes his living through impermissible or prohibited means, you're making money in a haram way. You're giving loans and you're collecting interest on them, that's how you make your money. Or you're selling things that are not permissible to sell. Or you're obtaining things that are not permissible for you to obtain. You are taking things that are not your right. So it may seem that, yes, I didn't have this money before, but because I lied, I got this money. So it may seem that you have made this money, but there will be no barakah in this money. that the things, what you were able to buy with $100 before using halal money, now even $200 will not satisfy your bills. You were making $2,000 a month before halal, and all of your bills were getting paid. Now you're making $5,000 a month, but somehow you still end up short every month. You got to dip into your savings. And from the point of view of barakah, from the point of view of this world even, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala can cause an increase or decrease to our wealth. If we're getting our money through haram means, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there will be no barakah in it. And so even though you're making a lot more money than you are now, there's going to be no benefit to it. And I'm sure many of us have heard the stories of the barakah in people's wealth. I'll give you just one example. There was an individual from our hometown, and he had property. He had a property business, but everything that all the houses he bought and all the real estate he bought, it was through haram means. And he was bringing in $15,000, $20,000 a month in net income, in net profits. After he paid his bills and after he paid everything, this is how much he was bringing in every month. And he had a nice car, he had a nice house, he had everything he needed, but he wasn't happy with himself. He didn't feel at peace. He said, I needed to pop pills. I needed to pop pills to go to sleep at night. That's how uneasy he was. And then he said, subhanAllah, one day, he said, this enough is enough. I can't do this anymore. The guilt was getting to him. And he knew that what I am doing is not permissible. And so he got rid of everything. He liquidated everything. He cashed everything out. And then he started a small company on the side. And he said, now I'm making like $3,000, $3,500 a month. But he said, Wallahi, when I go to sleep at night, I am carefree. I have no worries, I am at peace. So this is the power of barakah. That something is not only just haram, and the sin for that on its own. That should be enough for us to say, I don't want to do this. But even if that is not enough, the barakah and the blessings of halal will permeate through our lives. And the vileness of haram will affect the rest of our lives as well. That is why they say that if you're ever eating with non-Muslims, or especially in this country, we socialize with non-Muslims all the time. They said, feed them halal food. Yeah, for them, they don't care if it's halal or not halal, but if you feed them halal food, the barakah of that might influence their decision, might make them at least, if not accept Islam, at least feel good about Islam. And if you can live your life and even one person either becomes Muslim because of you, or even one person becomes such that they start thinking good about Islam, every single thing, the good deed they do after that, you will get blessings for it. It's a passive investment. You're not doing any work, but you're getting the good deeds for it. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allow us all to invest in such investments. So the point is that riba, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that it may seem like you're getting a profit, but at the end of the day, you're going to be at a loss. Whether there's no barakah in this world or the sin in the hereafter, whatever Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala meant, you're going to be at a loss. And then secondly, the verse that is mentioned 3 verses after this, or 2 verses after this, فَإِن لَمْ تَفْعَلُوا فَأْذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. This is one of the scariest verses in the Quran, that if you do not avoid interest, if you are not going to abandon interest, then فَأَذَنُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ, then prepare yourself, or you are announcing that you are going to war against Allah and His Prophet. That if someone does not avoid interest, you are going to war, harb. Harbin min Allahi wa Rasuli, harb with Allah and His Prophet. You are fighting with Allah and His Prophet. Can someone even imagine? Fine, we have bad deeds, we make mistakes, we sin, but actually going to war against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I mean, it's in my opinion one of the scariest verses in the Quran. There are only 2 things that are mentioned that it is equivalent to fighting and warring against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. One interest, riba. And the second thing, it is mentioned in the hadith that someone who bothers waliyullah, someone who bothers a man of Allah, someone who is connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and you cause him unnecessary pain and grief, that is equivalent to waging war against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala as well. Someone who is waliyullah, someone who is the friend of Allah, someone who has devoted his life to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, you go and you bother him, you cause him pain, you cause him grief, and he doesn't deserve it, or she doesn't deserve it. This is war against Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet. So these two sins are some of the scariest sins because of this wa'id. So riba, it's absolutely essential that we try to avoid it at all costs. And qarz, when you give someone a loan in the US, the US economic system or the financial system or the investments, the different markets that we have, a qarz is always seen as a form of investment. A loan is seen as a form of investment. If my money is going to be tied up for the next 6 months, for the next year, for the next 2 days even, I need to be compensated for this. This is how people view loans. That if my money is going to be tied up for the next however many, even for a couple seconds, couple minutes, I need to be compensated for this. The Islamic viewpoint of loans is that it is tabarru'. It is a form of charity. If someone is in need of money and you give him that loan, the reward for that is unimaginable. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ said, مَا مِن مُسْلِمٍ يُقْرِضُ مُسْلِمًا قَرْضًا مَرَّتَيْنِ إِلَّا كَانَ كَصَدَقَتِهَا مَرَّةً. He said in a hadith narrated by Ibn Majah, any Muslim who gives another Muslim a loan twice, it is as if he did sadaqah once. Someone needs money, you give him $1,000 loan. And he says, I'll pay you back at my next paycheck or within the next whatever. So you gave him $1,000, he used it for whatever he had to, and then he gave you back that $1,000. Yeah, your money was tied up for some amount of time, but you got all your money back. It is as if you have just donated $500. The reward you get for just giving away $500 to the masjid, to the people who are in need, to your relatives, the reward you get for just donating, you get that reward for giving a loan. Whatever loan amount you gave, half of that, it's as if you have donated it. You got all your money back, but you get the reward for donating half of it. Islam considers loan to be tabarru'. Similarly, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Man andhara mu'siran kana lahu bi kulli yawmin sadaqatan." That someone owes you money, and you have told him that you can pay me back in 3 days, you can pay me back in 10 days, you can pay me back in a year. Every single day that you have given him to pay you back, every single day you get a sadaqah for that. You get a good deed for every single day that your money is tied up. You've given him a loan today, even for $1, and you say, pay me back next week. So for 7 days, you get a sadaqah every single day. Pay me back next year, you get 365 sadaqahs, or 64. It's in Islam, and the next part of the hadith, man andarahu ba'da hillihi kana lahu mithluhu fi kulli yawmin sadaqa. And he was supposed to pay you back in a week. A week later, he comes and says, listen, I don't have the money, give me some more time, please. And so you give him some more time. Now, every single day, it is as if he has given him a new loan. Every single day. Every single day you will be getting the reward for giving $1,000. He was supposed to pay you back 3 days ago. You said, fine, have 3 more days. Now it's as if 3 times you've given him a loan for $1,000. So this is the value of loans. If you know, there are many people that they look for people who are in need. Someone is in need of money. Someone needs to finance something. He needs to buy something. He wants to buy a car. He wants to buy a house. He doesn't have 30,000, 40,000, 100,000, whatever, cash sitting. And let me give him a loan, 0% interest. And you just pay me back $1,000, $2,000, whatever, every month until we can take care of it. There are people who look for people like this because of this reward. So interest, qarz, loans are something that is it is a form of charity in Islam. You cannot be compensated for giving a loan. And if you want compensation for your loan, this is riba. This is what interest is. And interest is of two types. You have riba al-Quran and you have riba al-Hadith. Riba al-Quran means I have given you $1,000 and I'm going to take it back a year from now, but every month you're going to give me $10. This is called a 1% interest bond. And these bonds that we are given, that companies issue or the government issues, the bonds, sanadat, this is what it is. You lend $1,000, and 1 year later, 5 years later, 10, whatever the maturity of the bond is, you're going to get all of that money back. But every month or every 6 months or whatever the terms of the bond is, you're going to get back some amount. So this is riba al-Quran. The second type of riba is riba al-Hadith, that you gave 1 date and you got back 2 dates. You gave 1 ounce of gold and you got back 2 ounces of gold. So this is riba al-Hadith. Both types of riba are prohibited. One is mentioned in the Quran as haram and one is mentioned in the Hadith as haram. Both types of riba we have to avoid. So the purpose of this gathering or the purpose of this talk is to talk about riba versus rent. These financing options that we have, the purpose of financing is simply someone wants to buy something, he doesn't have this much cash on hand, he needs someone to give him this much cash and then he's going to pay him back somehow. And the person who he's going to pay back, he needs to be compensated in some way. And now we mentioned already that he cannot be compensated as cash. There needs to be some other way, some other incentive for this person to give you this money. Does that make sense? You need to buy something. You want to buy a car, it costs $30,000. You don't have that kind of money on you. So you need someone to give you $30,000 cash so you can go and buy that car and then you'll pay back this person. Right? It should be a 0% interest loan. You've taken $30,000 from him, you pay him back $30,000 over the course of 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. But that's not always feasible for everyone. Not everyone is in a position that they can say, here, take $30,000, fine, you pay me back 2 years, 3 years later, it's okay, I don't need the money right now. Not everyone is in that position. So how do we incentivize that person to say, here, you're giving $30,000? What incentive can we give them that they'll be happy with giving away their money and getting it back a year, 2 years, 3 years later? Apart from the hadith, apart from the reward that you get, what other incentive can we offer them? What models does Islam present so that the halal form of business, the halal profit, how can he make money that is not riba, but it is halal for him? And so there are a number of different concepts, but before we get into the different models, there are 4 points that I want to mention. 4 things that it is not permissible to have these in transactions. When we're buying and selling something amongst each other, there are 4 things that we cannot do. Number 1, you cannot sell what you do not own or what you do not have possession of. Right? You have something, I'm selling you something that is not mine. It belongs to someone else. But me and you are having a sale. This is not permissible. لا تبع ما ليس عندك. Don't sell what you do not have, what you do not own, what you do not have possession of. This is what drop shipping is. Drop shipping, you put an ad out that if someone wants to buy this microphone for $10, you can buy it from me. You get a buyer, he says, I would like to buy this microphone for $10. You don't own this microphone, but you put this ad out. And then you engage in a sale with this person. You have the offer and acceptance, you have the consideration, and he gives you the money and you say, okay, it will be delivered to you within 3 days, 5 days, whatever it is. And then you go and then you buy it from someone else for $9. And then you give it to him. And so you made $1 profit. So you are selling what you do not own. So bay'u ma la yamlik or bay'u ma la yaqbid in Arabic it's called. This is not permissible. The second, it is not permissible to sell that which cannot be transferred. Yeah, you own it, but you cannot transfer it over. You own the house, but there's no way you can deliver the house to him because someone else has taken that house, or because there is a lien on that house, or you are selling animals and you don't own those animals and they cannot be transferred, or someone owes you money. This person owes me $500, and so you can buy this loan from me that now he will owe you $500. You cannot do this. So selling what one does not own and selling what one cannot be, selling that which cannot be transferred, this is not allowed. The third is to have an undecided transaction. Some part of the transaction is ambiguous. The price is ambiguous. You're selling a house and you say, hey, if you pay it off in 5 years, it'll be 100,000. If you pay it off in 7 years, it'll be 120,000. This is an undecided transaction. Al-bay'ul mutaraddid, and a transaction that is undecided. This is not allowed either. You have to settle on one price right now. It's either going to be sold for 100,000 or it's either going to be sold for 120,000. Whatever it is, the price has to be decided. And the fourth thing, which is perhaps the most important one, you are not allowed to benefit from an asset unless the asset is at your risk. I can only benefit from an asset if it is at my risk. What does that mean? I know that this buyer wants to buy this house for $100,000. And I know that this seller is willing to sell it for $80,000. The only way it would be permissible for you to be the middleman and make money is if you buy the house from the seller first, and then you sell it to the buyer. I buy it from the seller for $80,000. The house is now under my possession. It is at my risk. What does that mean? If anything happens to the house, the market value goes down, the market value goes up, it is my loss and my gain. And then I go and I sell it to this next person. This is permissible. But if I agree with the buyer here and I agree with the seller here, and I never let the object of sale, the house, come into my possession, come into my ownership, and be at my risk, this is not permissible. Prophet Muhammad ﷺ has said, "La khiraja illa bil-zaman." No reward without risk. You have to, the object of sale, the thing has to be at your risk. Only then are you allowed to profit from it. So these are four things these are four preliminary points that we mentioned. And I'm going to present 3 or 4 alternative financing methods, and you keep these points in mind. So first we'll talk about if someone wants to buy a house, a regular mortgage, what happens? You go to any non-Islamic or conventional bank, Chase Bank or Bank of America, whatever it is, and you say, I want to buy this house costs $100,000, and they'll say, okay, you put 20% down, we'll front the rest. So you pay $20,000, the bank pays $80,000, you now own the house, and the bank has a lien on the property, and you pay off your mortgage with riba, with interest, in 15 years, 20 years, 30 years, whatever you agree on. And so after 15, 20, 30 years, you'll have paid off the loan. If you include all the interest, all you have to do is pay off $80,000. But if you include interest over 30 years, you're probably paying back $150,000, $180,000, depending on the interest rate, depending on how long, all these factors. This is how a normal mortgage works. You take a loan, you take cash from the bank, and then you give back that cash to the bank plus interest. And that plus interest can be double the amount that you borrowed. So this is a ribawi transaction. This is the haram transaction. This is the transaction that Allah says, فَأْذَرُوا بِحَرْبٍ مِّنَ اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. This is the transaction that Allah says you are declaring war on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Prophet. Now, the Islamic model, the first one is called al-musharaka al-mutanaqisa, diminishing partnership model. In this, what happens? Same scenario. It's a $100,000 house. I want to buy the house. I go to now an Islamic bank. And the bank says, okay, you put 20% down, we'll front the remaining 80%. So now it's a partnership, right? So you put 20%, they put 80%, you now own 20% of the house, and the bank owns 80% of the house. In the first case, you own everything, but the bank just has a lien on the property. In this case, you bank and you own the property together. And then, because you own 20% and the bank owns 80%, who's going to live in that property? You are, the buyer, the home buyer, not the bank. The bank doesn't care about the property. You want to live in that house. So now you're living in a house that you only own 20% in. You don't own 80% of this house, but you're living in it. So you have to pay rent. You have to pay rent for living in this house. A house of this size, of this, in this locality, with this square footage, built in this year. Just to keep our numbers easy, let's say you would get $1,000 a month in rent. If you were to rent it out to someone, you would get $1,000 in rent. Just to keep our numbers easy. So now, the first month that you lived there, you should pay rent. How much rent are you going to pay? Normally, you would get $1,000, but you own 20% and the bank owns 80%, so you're going to pay 80% of $1,000. How much are you going to pay? $800. Does that make sense? The first month, you're going to pay $800 in rent to the bank because the bank owns 80% of it. You're living in someone else's house. And so if you're living in someone else's house, you have to pay the owner the rent. So you're going to pay $800 a month in rent. At the same time, let's say we have agreed that your monthly payment will be $900. So you pay the first payment of $900. The first $800 is gone for rent. That extra $100, you have just bought a share of that property. So now next month, again, I know the math doesn't add up, but just to keep our numbers easy, next month you now own 21% of the house because you bought a share of that house last month. You own 21% of the house, and that bank now owns 79% of that house. And so the next month, second month ends, again, you're going to pay $900. But now $790 of that will be for rent, and $110 will be you just bought another share. So now you own 22.1%, something like that, of the house. And the bank owns 77.9% of the house. And so now the third month finishes, you're going to pay $900 again. Now this time, only $789 will be for rent. The remaining $111 will be you bought a share. And so the way they work out the numbers, the last month, at the end of your 15-year, 30-year, 20-year, whatever you agree on, the last month, you pay your $900. You probably own 95, 98, 99% of the house at this point. The last time you pay the $900, you paid maybe $100 in rent, $50 in rent, and you have just bought the final share of that house. And now you own 100% of that house. The bank owns 0% of that house. And now there's no more rent to pay because you own the whole house. So you don't owe anyone rent. At the same time, there's no more shares to buy because you own 100% of the house. You walk away, bank walks away. This is the diminishing partnership model. The majority of non-interest-based banks or so-called Islamic banks, this is the product, the model that they offer, the diminishing partnership. Now, one can easily say, and people do say, you just replace the word riba and you put the word rent here, right? If you add up all the numbers and you're paying rent every month and you're buying shares every month, for the bank put on only $80,000, but at the end of 25 years, at the end of 30 years, they took home $160,000. And the exact same thing happened at Chase Bank, where the bank put only $80,000 and they took home $160,000. So what difference is there really? Where either way, I'm paying a lot of money. And either way, at the end of the day, what really is the difference between these two models? And the answer is very, very simple. Risk. Who has risk for this asset? Remember I said before, risk without reward without risk is not permissible. You are only allowed to benefit from an asset if you are taking the risk of it. Now, how do these two cases differ? Let's say you have a 30-year mortgage with a normal haram bank, And 15 years into your 30-year mortgage, the house blows up. The house catches fire. The earthquake happens. Whatever happens, the house value is now zero. What is the bank going to say? They're going to say, oh, doesn't matter what happens to what happened with the money you got from us. We don't care whether you bought a house or you bought a car, you bought whatever. We gave you cash, and we expect our cash back. We gave you a loan, and we expect payments on those loans to be made. If not, we're going to garnish your wages, we're going to collection agencies, and whatever it is, they're going to go after you. Because they gave you cash, and they want cash back. That's what riba is, that's what interest is, right? Cash for cash, with an extra. But in an Islamic mortgage, in this diminishing musharaka model, in this diminishing partnership model, it's true partnership. And so if 15 years into a 30-year mortgage, the house blows up, the house value goes to zero. There's no more house anymore to rent, so he's not paying rent anymore. There's no more house left. What shares are you buying? You walk away, they walk away. Loan gets wiped out. This is the biggest difference between a haram mortgage and a partnership-based mortgage. Liability, risk, zaman. And if you look, for those of us who have studied finance, especially derivatives, the biggest factor, the main thing that you look at in any contract to figure out what is this contract worth, you look at who carries the risk and who gets the reward. If the stock price goes to $1 billion, who benefits from this? If the stock price goes to zero, who benefits from this? Or who gets the loss from this? You look at liability, you look at risk, and that will determine whether this contract is different or not. And so we do the same thing over here. In the diminishing partnership model, the risk is shared. The risk is shared between the bank and the homeowner, or the financier, whoever is, the homeowner, the home buyer. And that is why riba and rent are separate. In riba, doesn't matter what happened, you're going to pay the money back. Whether the house is there or not, in this, if there is a house, only then can we keep the rent and equity purchase, the rent and the share purchase thing going. If there's no house anymore, then both parties walk away. That's why some of these Islamic banks, you'll see even on their brochure, in the event of a natural disaster, or in the event of, sometimes the government will force you to sell your house to them. In the event of any of these, in other words, the house is gone and it's not your fault. The house is gone and you couldn't do anything about it. The bank says we will walk away. And if there is an insurance payout, the house was destroyed and the insurance paid some money, what are the banks going to do? They're going to see, okay, at this point in the relationship, at this point, who owns how much? Right? You're buying shares every month. Every month, the ownership structure, the ownership ratio is changing. The first month, the bank owned 80% and you owned 20%. 10 years later, maybe the bank owns 60% and you own 40%. At the end of the mortgage, when there's a couple of years left, maybe the bank owns 10%, you own 90%. So depending on where we're at in the mortgage model, depending on where we're at, that's how we're going to divide the insurance payout as well. This is what true partnership is. That not only are you assuming the risk of the object of sale, but you are also assuming the benefits, you get them in proportion as well. This is true partnership. So this is the diminishing musharaka model. Yes? I mean, it depends on what kind of payout you have, right? It depends on if you put, like some insurances are such that if the house is destroyed, whatever the value of the home is, you're going to get that amount. Some insurances are, you'll get $10,000, you'll get $20,000, you'll get $500,000. Yeah, so whatever the insurance payout is, whatever the legal requirements are, they differ from state to state. Yeah. But even then, when insurance payouts, insurance companies are notorious for trying to find ways not to pay. And so, there have been many cases, well documented. There have been academic studies on this as well. Very well documented cases where the insurance company should have paid, but because they had million-dollar lawyers, they didn't pay. But the point is, at the end of the day, whether the insurance pays or not, if they pay, it's going to be divided according to this structure. If they don't pay, or if they pay less than they should be, whatever they pay, it's even if they pay $1, 60 cents will go to this party, 40 cents will go to this party. That is what true partnership is, of course. And please, if you have any questions, please interrupt me during the speech, during the talk. It makes things much easier. Yeah, please.
So what about if the value of the property appreciates?
Yeah. So the value of the property, if it appreciates over time, and every month you're buying shares of that property, technically speaking, they can reevaluate their contract and say, look, the property value went up, and so now, yeah, you were paying me, the rent value went up and the property value went up. Because the property value went up, the rent will go up as well, and the share prices will go up as well. So technically speaking, yes, they can readjust every single month. However, I should mention most banks don't do this. The banks have the right to do this. Exactly like you said, the property value went up, the bank owns a large chunk of this, so of course they can charge you more for it. But they don't do this because it just confuses everyone. And getting the house appraised every month, it's a very expensive process. It's like $600-700 just to get the house appraised. So most Islamic banks, I can't speak for all of them, but most of them, they don't do this. Did you have a question? No? Okay. So this is the diminishing partnership model. Your monthly payments are made up of equity purchase, or in other words, purchasing shares of the house, and rent. And of course, if there is no asset anymore, there's going to be no rent and no purchases anymore. In the haram mortgage, they're going to come after you, and we've seen the horror stories after the 08 financial crash, after the stock market, after the real estate market crash. We still see people who are struggling to pay off those loans because the interest rates were low and they took out second and third mortgages. And because it was just money on money, whether the house is destroyed or not, whether the house value goes to zero or not, they still have to pay. And when you mentioned if the property value goes up, the bank can ask for more. If the property value goes down, the buyer can say, hey, the property value went down, decrease my rent and decrease my how much I'm buying my shares for. So, and that's what refinancing is. I'm sorry? It can go both ways, right? So the good thing about the banks that I'm talking about, there's two banks that I know of. I know of Guidance and I know of UIF. The good thing about those two banks is that if the property value goes down, they give you the option to refinance. But if the property value goes up, they don't refinance and they let you enjoy those profits. And historically speaking, apart from the 08 crash, historically, real estate prices have always gone up, at least 2 or 3% a year. These past few years are a bit weird. It's been going up a lot more than that. But this is the diminishing partnership model, and this is the model that the majority of banks use. And yes.
So what happens if you default when you have partnership, let's say like 95%, and something, a very big event happens,
Yeah.
and you default, and you can't pay for that house. A bank will grab the house from you.
Yeah.
So what happens with the Islamic bank?
So when you default, the conventional banks and the Islamic banks, they will give you 6-month grace period, 1-year grace period, whatever it is. And then most likely the house goes into foreclosure. You get a judge has to usually sign off on foreclosures. And then they have the power to evict you from that property. And then that house goes to auction. And then they sell that house. And whatever money you make from selling that house, the buyer buys the house, whatever money is made, first and foremost, the bank makes back its money. I'm talking about a haram bank, a normal bank. The bank makes its money back, and then if there's any crumbs left over, they'll give it to you as well. But in an Islamic bank, you can't make your payments anymore. You have defaulted on your loan. and or for whatever reason you're not making the payments anymore, the bank will do the same thing. The Islamic bank will do the same thing. They'll foreclose the house, they'll get a judge's order, they'll evict you, they'll put the house at auction, but when they sell the house, the proceeds will be split according to the ownership ratio at that point. Whether the bank loses money with that or the bank makes money with that, it doesn't really matter. Whatever the ownership ratio is at that point, that's how it will be split. Now, one thing that is prudent to mention here is that because the ownership is shared, but one party is occupying the property. Now, that means those fees that are connected to owning the property, they will be split. For example, property taxes. Property taxes, who pays property taxes? Not the occupant of the property, rather the one who owns the property. Whoever owns the property will have to pay property taxes on it. And so every year, whatever the taxes are, you're going to figure out what is the ownership ratio here. And if I have to pay $5,000 in property taxes and the bank owns 60%, the customer owns 40%, the bank will pay $3,000 and the homeowner, the customer will pay $2,000. Every fee, every financial penalty that comes with owning the property will be split according to the ownership ratio. However, those fees that have to do with whoever occupies the property, that will be paid by the customer only, right? Like maintenance, lawn care, HOA, or these fees that have to do with whoever is owning the property, that will be paid by the customer. Yes, of course. Yeah. 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 You still have the same option. You can do it in one of two ways. You can either inform the bank that I want to liquidate, I want to sell the property, and the bank will say, okay, I've seen, like, I know guidance will do it, that the guidance will say whatever our investment is, let us make that money back, and then you can keep the rest. And I believe UIF, the way they do it is they say, fine, sell the house, whatever the investment ratio is, we're going to split it that way. So you have both options, but that's from what I remember. But a true Islamic bank, they would say, fine, you want to sell it, sell it. And whatever the ownership ratio is, that's how we're going to divide it. That's what the Islamic way is, right? If you and I own a car 50-50 and we sell the car, whatever proceeds we get, we're going to split them 50-50. So that's the Islamic way of doing it. And it happens all the time, especially those who flip houses, or they'll buy the house for very, very cheap. They'll put their own money into it and whatever, and then they'll sell it for 40%, 50% profit, and they'll give the bank back their money. There's no early prepayment or early payment fees either. And they, you pay them back their money, and the rest of the profit you pocket. This is the diminishing partnership model. This is the one that is the most complex. The second one is the ijara model, the rent to own model, as it's called colloquially, which simply means that you want to buy this house, the bank buys that house for you. The bank will buy that house for whatever amount of money it is, $100,000, they buy that house. And then you sign a 5-year, 10-year, whatever it is, rental agreement with the bank, that I will rent from this bank the house for 10 years, for 15 years, for whatever it is. And you're paying your monthly rent. At the end of whatever you agree on, the bank will simply transfer that house over to you as a gift, or they'll transfer it over for $1 or whatever it is. This type of financing is very, very common in regular companies as well. If you're ever financing or renting like office equipment or a lot of home furniture equipment and stuff like that, the bank will offer you this, that you pay. I'll give you an example. Our printer that we have at our masjid, we pay $99 something, $100 a month for the printer. And anything that goes wrong with the printer, they will come and they will fix it. And then they say this is a 3-year contract. You're going to pay us $100 for 3 years. So in other words, we're going to pay them $3,600. And then at the end of 3 years, you have the option to buy it for $1 from us, or you can say, give me a new printer and we'll start a new ijara contract. Give me the newest model that is out now. So it's the same model that applies here, rent-to-own model, where you are simply renting, and at the end of your whatever period you agree on, that person buys it. Now look, again, who has liability here? If I'm renting my car to someone, if I'm renting my home to someone, and something happens to that home, something happens to that car, it's not the renter's fault, it's not the lessee's fault. Lightning hits, or it's stolen, or whatever it is, it's not the guy's fault who rented it. So now the owner will take this hit. The owner will take this loss. In the example of the printer I just gave, let's say there was a power surge and the printer gets fried. Someone breaks into the masjid and steals the printer. Something happens, and it's not our fault. We did our job, but for whatever reason, this thing was destroyed. Now, that company will take the loss for this because they are the ones who owned it. If it was my fault, I crashed the car or I messed up the printer, then yeah, the company can say, hey, this was my thing. You were just renting it. You were not allowed to break it. And so now you're going to pay us for it. But the owner, what we call natural disasters, right? Loss from natural disasters, the owner has to take liability for those. So the same thing with the house. If it's an ijara model, if it's an ijara contract, the bank has to have liability for this. They have to have liability that if lightning strikes, you get flooding or whatever happens to the property and it's uninhabitable, the purchaser can just walk away and he does not bear any risk. If it was his fault, he messed with the house, he broke it down, or he did something he was not supposed to, then fine, obviously. The bank can come after him and say, this is our property, you damaged our property, we're suing you for property destruction, or whatever it is. So in the ijara model, you're not sharing ownership. The ownership is for the bank, and you are simply renting it from them. So the way any renters, the way you would treat any normal rental, that's how you would treat this. The only difference is at the end of the rental period, at the end of the rental agreement, you're going to transfer it over to them for $1 or for whatever it is. That was the ijara model. Yes? No, please. Yeah. 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 That is true. In the ijara model, that's why the ijara model is not feasible for if the period is more than 3 to 5 years. Sometimes it works for cars, like ijara, University of Islamic Financial, UIF, they're doing this model for cars, for auto loans, but they're not using this model for houses, and for this very reason. But one thing you have to understand is that you're right. It was a $300 thing or $500 thing, and you've paid $1,800 over the course of 5 years. But one thing you have to understand is that you have an extra protection in place. That if within this 3 to 5 years the thing malfunctions and it breaks down, you have you're not taking any hits. You're not taking a loss. So because of this added benefit as well, it's somewhat justifiable, this higher price, right? No risk, no reward without any risk. And if the bank is taking this risk, they expect to be compensated for it. The risk return trade-off. This is a calculation, the Sharpe ratio, what's called in finance. This is a calculation that all financial institutions do to make sure that, look, we're taking a huge risk here by saying that we have liability of this object of sale. And if we're going to take this risk, we expect to be compensated for it. Why? Because if we have 100 of these contracts out, depending on our calculations, 20 of them are going to fail, and we're going to take that loss. We're going to take that hit. And so we need to make sure we're making enough money from all of them so that we can compensate for this loss over a wide range of customers that we have. So you're absolutely right. You end up paying sometimes a lot more. Even in the diminishing partnership model, in the first model, the guy only lent you $80,000, and you've paid him back 160. He just doubled his money over the course of 15 years or something like that. It's actually a lot more than that. If in the 30-year mortgage, depending on the interest rates, you can get 4 times your investment back or 5 times your investment back. So it's the same thing over there. You only paid me $80,000, and you're taking home $160,000. But over there as well, he is taking a risk. If God forbid something happens to that house, he took a loss. So. Yeah. Yeah. And that's why, because the bank is picking up extra liability. That's why the fact that if something happens to the house mid-mortgage, the bank takes a huge hit, it's very, very justifiable for the bank to charge you more than the haram banks. Because the haram banks, no matter what happens to the house was just rihin, was just collateral. What they care about was the money. So they're going to get their money regardless. But for the Islamic banks, they might lose out at the end of the day. So for them, it makes sense to charge more. But if you look at it, on average, Islamic banks and conventional banks, they'll charge you about the same. Again, I'm only talking from experience on guidance and University of Islamic Financial. I have no idea about the other banks. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to understand these Islamic banks, they're not waking up in the morning and saying, inshallah, we're going to protect so many people from haram today. No. They're waking up in the morning and saying, hey, how many millions can we make today? It's a business for them. They're not a 501c3. They're not a non-profit organization. They're a business. They're a bank. They're in it to make money, but they're doing it the halal way. And they're making money the halal way. That's why, and they're giving regular people the option to buy houses in a halal way and the option to buy cars in a halal way, and that's why we support them. Not because they're saints and they're doing something that is something out of the good of their hearts. They're in it to make money. There's no doubt. A lot of these banks, if you look at their operating budgets and their marketing budgets, these guys are multi-million-dollar, maybe even billion-dollar corporations. Some of these banks, just their marketing budget is $30 million a year, just for marketing. That's how much money they spend on marketing. So it's a business. They're not doing you any favors. They're making money. The only benefit is that we have a halal option at the end of the day. That's why, and a lot of things that they do from a moral point of view, if someone is unable to pay, the hadith says, give him respite, give him respite, give him respite. But at some point, they are going to go and evict you. They are going to go and foreclose the house. That's why one of my teachers, the individual who was responsible for the majority of these models, he's a scholar in Pakistan by the name of Mufti Taqi Uthmani. He's the vice chairman for Majma' al-Fiqh al-Islami al-Dawli in Jeddah as well, the International Islamic Fiqh Academy, where they can discuss contemporary issues, and they have the big muftis from all over the world in the Maliki, Hanbali, the Shafi'i, the Hanafi, and the Ahl Hadith madhab. They all gather together, but he is responsible for him, and there was another scholar in India. They were responsible for the majority of these models, giving the world a non-interest based model for financing, for purchasing different goods. So he says, don't call them Islamic banks, call them non-interest based banks. Right? They're not saints from Allah, they're not pious individuals. I mean, I'm sure they are, but call them non-interest based banks. Don't call them Islamic banks. It's just a difference of words. It's a minor distinction, but it shows you that it's not that these people are, out of the good of their hearts, that we don't want to do something haram, or that might be a big factor. But at the end of the day, the main goal is, this is a business. We got to put food on the table, and we got to make money for our company. That's their business, and that's the mentality that you should go into it. Don't expect that, the way you go to a masjid and the imam does pretty much everything for free. You need counseling, or you need help with a marriage, or you need help with whatever. They do a lot of things for free. That's not the attitude that you should have. I mean, in my opinion, that's a different topic.
Leasing or rent-to-own model.
Yeah.
I've seen that whenever you go there, they have a formula based on interest.
Yeah.
So even if you lease a car, they have
Yeah.
a factor where they charge interest.
Yeah.
What do you think about that?
So
Is it allowed to do that?
they're using it as a benchmark at the end of the day. If they charge you a higher rent, they're going to make more money. If they charge you lower rent, they're going to make less money. So they're using the interest rate, the Federal Reserve interest rate for 30-year loans, for the T-bill rate. Basically, in the U.S., this is a finance subject now, but in the U.S., you have what's called time value of money. In all secular financial systems, time value of money. What that means is $1 today is worth more than $1 tomorrow. If I'm gonna give you $1 today, tomorrow I need to collect back more than $1 from you, because my dollar was stuck with you for a one day, and so you should owe me something for that. However, there is risk in lending to anyone, right? Maybe they'll pay me back, maybe they'll declare bankruptcy, maybe they'll default on their loans, maybe this will happen, maybe that. So there is a risk. So you have to charge more and more money depending on how much risk. And again, this is the Sudi model. This is the Ribawi model. You charge more and more money depending on how risky this person is. If your FICO score or your credit score is very, very low, you're going to have a higher interest rate. If your FICO score is very, very high, you're going to have a lower interest rate. But when you lend to the US government, what that means is you buy T-bills, you buy treasury bonds or treasury bills. That is considered risk-free investment, because the only way that you are not going to get paid back those loans is if the federal government itself completely defaults. If the federal government itself completely is unable to pay its bills, only then will those bills not be paid. And they say this is virtually impossible, allegedly. And so that's why whatever the federal rate is for 5-year loans, for 10-year loans, for 30-year loans, this is called the risk-free rate. And so what they do is they say, for a 5-year loan, I should be making, the risk-free rate is 5%. That if I put my money with the federal government, I'm going to be making 5% a year with zero risk. You are more risky than the federal government, so I should be charging you, what did I say, 3%? 3% was the risk-free rate. I should be charging you 4% or 5% or 6%, because you are riskier than them. This is how normal banks work. When they're going to give you a mortgage, they're going to run your credit score, your credit history, and they're going to say, okay, the risk-free rate is 3% for a 30-year mortgage, and this guy wants a 30-year mortgage than me. He's a lot more risky than the federal government. So you know what? They have their own models. So we'll give him 6%. We'll give him 7%. So conventional, the non-interest based banks, they have similar models. They say, look, the common mentality is, or the common norm is, that if I put my money with the federal government for 10 years, I'm going to get 3%. I'm going to put it with this guy for 10 years, I should get a little bit more than 3%. So they're going to adjust the rents that way. They're going to give you maybe a little bit higher rent or maybe a little bit lower rent. But no matter what rent they choose and no matter what price they choose, the liabilities will not change. And that is the major thing that differentiates between Islamic conventional mortgages and non-conventional mortgages. Always remember, this is what differentiates riba versus rent. Liability, dhaman, risk. Yeah.
Lease a car, if there is a board interest involved in that lease, and the contract, they have small interest in each other of this lease. So can we lease that car?
Why would there be interest on a lease? Lease is just...
Most of the leases have interest. We don't know about that, but I have read the contract word to word for Honda and Toyota. They have interest term there in their lease contracts.
But for what? I mean, interest only makes sense if you owe someone money. You don't owe them money. Is it for late payments?
No, not for late payment. Whenever you go for the lease, whenever you do a down payment, there is interest involved.
That's weird.
I was a little confused, so I asked the guy in finance to explain. And he says that most of the 80% of the leases
Okay.
That is involved in the lease contract. So
It might be how much money they're charging you for the lease. A lot of the banks they use LIBOR, the London Interbank, something operational rate, something like that, and they say they use it as a benchmark. Like I said, they use the Federal Reserve interest rate as a benchmark. They say that we're leasing this car. The way leases work in the U.S. is this. Right now, this car is worth $50,000. He's leasing it for 2 years, and so at the end of 2 years, our models predict that this car will be worth $30,000, for example. So essentially, the way they're thinking is that we're going to lose $20,000 in 2 years, so we got to charge him $24,000 over 2 years. That's how their models. That's how roughly that's how they operate. But this interest, maybe he's using. That's what he's referring to. They're using interest as a benchmark, as a guide to say how much money should we be making on our investment by increasing or decreasing the rent prices. Maybe that's what he's referring to, but without reading the contract itself, I can't really say for sure.
if you go to Tesla's website, they have
Tesla's? Yeah.
and then interest rate. So it's kind of very confusing. So they calculate based on the
What I think it might be referring to is, so like I said, it was $50,000, and then at the end of 2 years, it'll be a $30,000 car. So they're losing $20,000. So they probably are saying we want to make 5% interest on this $20,000. Yeah, if at the end of the day, if you are not paying interest, they are simply using these rates to increase or decrease your rent prices, then fine. Your relationship is just rent. How they got to that number, it doesn't matter. How they agreed on the number of $500 a month or $1,000 a month for your lease payment, doesn't matter how they arrived at that conclusion. As long as your relationship with them is not interest-based, it's fine. That was the ijara model. The final model is the murabaha model. Murabaha, some call it the cost plus sale, but I don't really like that translation. Murabaha simply means that you have Murabaha means that you disclose the cost of the asset and then you sell it. What that means is when you want to buy a house, the house costs $100,000. The bank will simply buy that house and give it to you and sell it to you for a much higher price. The bank will buy that house. Remember that first example I gave where you have to lease, where you have to own that house and then you can sell it? That's what the bank will do. They will buy that house for $100,000 and they will say, fine, hey, we own this house now. Now you can buy it for $120,000, for $130,000, whatever it is, and you pay on installments. So if they're selling it to you for a price higher than they bought it for, which is obviously what they're going to do, they need to make their money. They're going to buy it for cheap and sell it to you for a bit higher. This is called murabaha. And sometimes banks will not do this, but if you're with a normal, your siblings or your co-worker or any loved one might do it for you, they'll buy the house for $100,000 and then they'll sell it to you for $100,000 but on installments. That will be called tawliya. If it's the same price you bought it for, it's tawliya. If you're making money on it, then it's murabaha. Now here, again, the bank is assuming risk, right? Because when they bought that house and before they sold that house for that 1 week, 1 month, 1 day, couple hours even, the bank is assuming risk of that house. So if when the bank bought that house from the seller and before they sold it to the buyer, the house blows up, that's the bank's loss. But after they sell it, now the seller owns the house, he's making payments on the house or whatever it is. The bank might even have a lien on the house, but this is simple, a sale on installments. This is permissible. So this is the murabaha and the tawliya model. Yeah, please.
So earlier you talked about foreclosures, right? So would it be allowed to purchase a foreclosure from the bank for not what the house is worth, but the remainder of the balance?
Your house is not foreclosed, somebody else's house is foreclosed, right?
The bank wants to sell a house, let's say it's worth 300,
Yeah.
and already 200 has been paid for it, and now they're only selling for 100,000 because they don't want to own the house.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fine. Whatever price you agree on, it's fine. It's between you and the bank or you and whoever the seller is. What is going on behind the scenes? It's not our problem. It's not our issue. So these are the four models: diminishing musharaka, diminishing partnership, al-musharakatul mutanaqisa. The second one is ijara, or rent to own. The third and fourth one are the murabaha and the tawliya models, which is you buying it for cheap and you're selling it for a bit more expensive, and you're doing it on installments. Now, the unfortunate thing for you is that guidance does not operate in Utah, and I don't know if UIF operates in Utah or not. They don't. I've been in talks with people of guidance, and I've told them that you guys don't have operations in Utah. You guys should consider it. He's like, there's not enough Muslims there, and I said, you mean there's not enough money there? Compared to Michigan or New York or Texas or California, where you have huge clusters of Muslims. And like I said, at the end of the day, don't think of these people as doing favors on you. They're in it for making money, and it costs them a lot of money to get licenses in different states. That's why they're only operating in a select few states. I believe guidance is only in like 16 or 17 states, or maybe 20-something states. But the point is, they're not in all 50 states. The federal government requires all mortgage lenders to have separate licenses for every state that they operate in, and so it's costly for them to get licenses for everyone. Even all these banks, like J.P. Morgan Chase or Bank of America, they have separate licenses for every single state. J.P. Morgan Chase in Utah is different than J.P. Morgan Chase in Nevada, than J.P. Morgan Chase. These are separate business entities, but they have partnerships. This is a legal issue. So the banks are not always an issue here, are not always available here. Inshallah, we make dua that Allah makes these things available to all Muslims in any state, in any part of the world. But these models can be applied for a lot of times people have money sitting in their account, and then they want to invest it somewhere. And they want to invest it somewhere and get a good return. They can invest in the stock market, you'll get 10 to 14% return. They can invest in real estate, you get maybe 15 to 20% return. But if you invest it in this way, that I need to buy a house, and this is my friend, and I know he has $100,000, $200,000 sitting in his account. Or a lot of times people pull from their 401ks and they invest their money like this. And so you use that $200,000 house, you use that $200,000 and you buy that house with this person, and you use a diminishing partnership model. So now I put 50,000, he put 200,000, I own 20%, he owns 80%. And every month we agree on some payment price, and every month I'm making payments to him, and over the course of 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, his $200,000 investment is $500,000 now. So it makes sense, both parties make money, but you have to realize at the end of the day, it's a shared investment, and if your investment goes south, if the house loses value, we have another real estate crash or whatever happens, both parties are going to take a loss, are going to take a hit. And so these are options that you do have available to you. But just make sure if you are going to do something like this, you have the contract that you are writing, the agreement that you have amongst yourselves. One is it's all written down. Right? The Quran says, Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu idha tadayantum bidayn ila ajalin musamman faktubu. O Muslims, whenever you have a transaction that is deferred, that is delayed, you have payments that are going to come afterwards, faktubuhu, write them down. And second, make sure from an Islamic point of view, there's nothing wrong with it. There is one Islamic bank, they use the ijara model, that they give you the loan, they buy the house from you, and then they give it to you on rent for 5 years, and then at the end of 5 years, they sell it to you for $1. And remember, we said the ijara model was fine because the bank is the one who owns this house, but they make you sign a waiver that says we have no liability, a no liability form. They make you sign a waiver that says the bank is not liable for this house. That means the house goes up in flames, the house value is zero, the bank doesn't care. You're still going to pay back that money. So tiny little clauses like this will make it just a normal interest-based mu'amala, an interest-based loan.
Most of the Islamic banks are like that. Many of them.
I know one of them that is like this, and the only two I can vouch for personally is guidance and ijara. I'm sorry? Guidance and UIF. What did I said something else. Guidance and UIF. But the other ones I can't, just because I don't know. Yes. I believe it's not. It's not right. No, it's not yet. So as of this moment, the best option that we have for house financing is you either find someone who is willing to do this investment for you, and remember, a lot of us, a lot of the working professionals, the engineers, doctors, lawyers, or those, in other words, those who are employed with someone, you have huge 401k balances. Over the course of 30 years, 40 years, even $400 a month, $500 a month turns into $500,000. And you can pull loans from your own 401k, not an early withdrawal, but you can pull a loan from your 401k, and you pay back your 401k over the course of however many years with interest. And you're paying yourself back with interest, and that because you're paying yourself with interest is not really interest. Even though the legal wordage is interest, but because you're paying yourself that back, it's not Islamically, it's not riba. So a lot of time, people who have money like this sitting around in their 401ks, invest it like this. Make sure you're covering yourself legally and Islamically, obviously, but help your Muslim brothers and sisters like this. Can you imagine if you are the reason that someone is able to live in a house and they don't have to pay rent after 10 years or after 15 years? You are the reason someone is able to build a home. Can you just imagine the reward one will get for that? And like I said, you give a loan to someone, it's as if you're helping someone buy a $200,000 house. It's as if you just gave away 100 grand. Can you imagine the reward for just giving away 100 grand? Right? I mean, maybe for some of you it's not that big of a deal, but for many of us it is a big deal. Yeah. I mean, the only people who are giving away $100,000 like this are the people who have billions, or who have. But the reward for this is, only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will be able to reward someone to the fullest who helps someone buy loans. And we see cases where, especially in Canada, where you didn't have Islamic banks readily available, and people got together, they pulled from their 401ks, and they did it. But just please make sure that you cover yourself both Islamically and legally. No, there's no loopholes in that contract. You might have to hire a lawyer, pay him $500 or whatever it is, however much they charge for writing these types of contracts, and then have an imam or someone look at it and make sure that there's nothing wrong with it Islamically. And this is how we can, inshallah, make home buying a reality for a lot of people. And yes. Yeah, as long as in the beginning of the contract you decide what the total price of the house is. It's not interest, it's bay'. Yeah. The main Yeah. Riba, translating riba as interest, I have issue with it because riba is much more broad than interest or even usury. So riba should be just translated as riba, but it's not always easy to do it that way. But the main difference at the end of the day is in riba, in like the murabaha, when you're buying it for cheap and selling it high, the payment for the houses, the price of the house is fixed. Even if he misses payments, there's no late fees. The price will not increase. For an interest-based transaction, at the end of every year, they say, okay, how much money is left on this balance? Okay, there's 100,000 left. Put the 8% multiplier on it. Now there's 108,000 left. At the end of the next year, there's 90,000 left. Put the 8% multiplier on it. Now there's 97,000 left. At the end of every year or every month, this is what it means to be compounded annually, compounded quarterly, compounded monthly. This is what it means. And so they put these multipliers on it, and that's what interest is. But in an Islamic transaction, the price has to be fixed. That's why I said, the third point is, it cannot be an undecided transaction. The price has to be fixed at the beginning of your sale.
So I have somebody else. inflation, can I charge him now? In the contract, he had $10,000 listed, more than $10,000.
Yeah. No, he can't. You cannot change the initial terms of the loan just because $10,000 20 years ago it was worth a lot more than it is today. In fact, I did a study once on different inflation rates around the world, and I did one for Pakistan. If someone lent $10,000 in 2011 in Pakistan, today or in 2021 it was worth about $22,000. So, no, I said it the other way around. If you lent $20,000, now that $20,000 only worth $10,000. And so, because of inflation, because the buying power is much less. So this is just because of inflation, you cannot change how much you're going to be giving or taking back. The only time where you can change the amount is when the currency is no longer in circulation. You lent him in USD, but now USD is no longer in circulation. That's the only time you're allowed to change it. That's why they say for countries like Pakistan or countries where you have hyperinflation or you have high levels of inflation, don't lend in the local currency, lend in gold. Give him a bar of gold or give him whatever in gold and say, give me back this many grams or this many ounces. Yeah, because gold is inflation resistant.
Last question is, when somebody said that my family member gave me $70,000 for a business. Now that business value is doubled, has doubled.
Yeah.
But we agreed in diminishing partnership model where I'm paying him the rent
Yeah.
for the business. Should I pay him $140,000 or is it okay? Because the contract was not done that we will pay more. Now the value has doubled. Should that $140,000 or $70,000?
Depending on whatever the market value is of their shares. So in diminishing partnership, but the ownership ratio is always changing, right? So maybe at this point now it's 50-50, or maybe it's 40-60, maybe it's 70-30. So let's say whoever the silent partner is, whoever the financier was, let's say they have 30% left in the business. They're allowed to ask for 30% of $140,000. Technically, that they can ask for that. At this point, the best thing for them to do, if they're having a disagreement, that you have mediation. You present evidence from both sides. You agree on someone who knows these issues. Your Imam Sahib will be able to do this. That you have someone who has knowledge on this, and he hears both sides, and he says, look, Islamically, this is around roughly the amount you're entitled to. And then you get both of them to agree on this, that look, you're going to pay this much amount, and you're going to sell your share of the business, and that's it. You have no interest in this business, and the business is now all theirs. These types of disputes, when they get this complex, this is the best way to resolve it. Because if they have no contract beforehand, they just did it verbally. So then yeah. So there's ambiguity in the contract. So then they would have to settle. They would have to do sulh. And the best way to do it is through find someone who is knowledgeable in these matters, and then they get them both to agree on something. That's it.
Mufti Sahab has to leave soon. Just last question because Mufti Sahab has to leave. Yeah, go ahead.
If I borrow someone money, like personal,
Yeah.
and we agreed that you pay me back in 3 months or a year, and after 3-4 weeks, he came back to me and said, hey, I need the money. I need my money.
Yeah.
No matter what we agreed for. Is this okay
No.
for me, or we have how to resolve this?
No.
What's the best way?
Islamically, once you have given him respite, once you have given him grace period, you can pay him back, next week. But he comes back 3 days later and he says, I want the money now. He has no right.
You just say, I need it.
Sorry, you can't do anything. If he wants to be good, he wants to be gracious, and he wants to give it back early, good. That's very, very good if he does that. But if he says, no, I'm not going to give it back, Islamically, he can't be forced to.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah, we'd like to thank Mufti Sahab for coming. Sahib said, a lot of people come to us and ask, a lot of people have come to me, even in this gathering, asking, how can we do something with this based and, get something that's halal. So if anybody's interested, and wants to go through that route and help somebody that's in need, then inshallah come contact me and then we can work with something with Mufti Sahib and we can come up with something that, there are a few brothers, a lot of brothers that have come to me asking, hey, how can we purchase something that's halal? If you can be a means of helping somebody purchase a house and then you can also get, benefit from that, then inshallah, or if you know somebody else, then why not be a means of that for your Muslim brothers and sisters? So inshallah, keep that in mind, and then anything else we can always keep in contact. We're really close, I'm really close with Mufti Sahib, so he's always just a call away, inshallah, so if we need anything. And make dua for Mufti Sahib, inshallah, and inshallah, Mufti Sahib, he would do the ending dua, inshallah.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد ربنا اغفر لنا ذنوبنا وإسرافنا في أمرنا وثبت أقدامنا وانصرنا على القوم الكافرين ربنا لا تزغ قلوبنا بعد إذ هديتنا وهب لنا من لدنك رحمة إنك أنت الوهاب ربنا هب لنا من أزواجنا وذرياتنا قرة المتقين إماما Ya Allah, accept from us all of our efforts and all of our sacrifices. Ya Allah, allow us to live our lives in the way that you have prescribed. Ya Allah, allow us to purify all of our money, and Ya Allah, allow us to have only and only halal income. And Ya Allah, allow us that we are able to rectify all aspects of our lives, and that we are able to buy and sell whatever we buy and sell in a manner that pleases you, in a manner that you have approved of. And Ya Allah, put barakah in our lives. Ya Allah, put barakah in our money. Ya Allah, put barakah in our families. And Ya Allah, put barakah in our relationships. And Ya Allah, all that we have heard and said, Ya Allah, accept all of it. And Ya Allah, allow all of us to benefit from it, and allow all of us to implement it into our lives. And Ya Allah, allow us to be Muslims not just by name, but Muslims by our actions as well. And Ya Allah, use us to benefit your religion the way you have used the Sahaba to benefit your religion, the way you have used the Prophets to benefit your religion. And Ya Allah, make us a means of the propagation of Islam. And Ya Allah, make us the means that Islam flourishes in this world. And Ya Allah, do not make us the reason that Islam is damaged. Ya Allah, do not make us the reason that Islam becomes unpopular. And Ya Allah, do not make us those who damage the reputation of Islam. Ya Allah, make us amongst those who aid and help the reputation of Islam, and those who increase and improve the reputation of Islam. And Ya Allah, allow us to spread Islam to all the non-Muslims who we associate with, to all the non-Muslims in our locality. And Ya Allah, allow us to benefit the religion. And Ya Allah, make us the means for the spreading of Islam in our communities, in our localities. Sallallahu ta'ala ala rasulihi khayri khalqihi Muhammadin wa alihi wa sahbihi wa ahli baytihi kullihim ajma'in. Bi rahmatika ya arhamar rahimin.